Tracy Nguyen Mang, in case you haven't met me yet. I'm the founder and host of the Vietnamese Boat People podcast. And for those of you that are not as familiar with our organization, we are a nonprofit organization with the mission of preserving and sharing stories of the Vietnamese diaspora. And we do this by interviewing individuals and families who have lived through these experiences, and we curate their stories and we share them globally on our podcast. So I'm like so excited I'm shaking. I don't know if you can tell I'm shaking. I'm excited because Thanhha is her book Inside Out and Back Again was one of the first books I read about 2 years ago when I was down this journey of trying to figure out my own family's history and trying to document it. And I wanted to read anything I could that was related to Vietnamese diaspora. And when I read the book, I connected with the character so deeply because I felt myself represented in her book. And since then, I've kind of reached out to her because I saw her at a panel, speaking panel, and I asked her to be a part of this event. I shared with her our mission, and I said, we love your stories and more people should know about them, and they align with our mission. So we're so grateful that she's here with us.
Thank you for inviting me. This is fun. This is just pure fun. There's no homework, so it's all good.
So Thanhha was born in Vietnam. She was born in the middle of the war. She came to the U.S. in 1975 when she was just 10 years old. And you'll see some of that refugee child voice is reflected in her first book, Inside Out and Back Again. It's won the Newbery Honor Award. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think after 8 years, it's still a New York Times bestseller, which is amazing. So if you haven't read it yet, you have to pick it up tonight. We are selling it at a special price after the Q&A, so it's a must read. But I want to just welcome her and thank you for being with us.
Thank you. All right.
All right, so let's get started. I have my notes here. All right, so I shared with everyone, Thanhha, that you came at 10 years old. So tell me, what do you remember about Vietnam leaving at 10? Do you remember anything?
I remember absolutely everything. Because remember, all I do is sit alone and remember. This is my job. So I remember what I ate. I remember what I wore. I remember the hot air. I remember that American soldiers showed up to our school in a public relations move and gave everyone baguettes. And I would eat half the baguette before I got home, and then I got in trouble. So these are the things I remember. And I remember the snacks. In Vietnam, you go out to the open market and you buy snacks. And apparently all I did there was eat, because that's all I remember. So Vietnam to me is just snacks.
And where was your family from in Vietnam?
We were from Saigon, and my father was in the Navy, so we got Navy housing. So we were right next to a river. I can't tell you which river. I'm sure everyone else can. And so that's how we escaped. We were right next to the river. And I have vivid memories of my elementary school. And I remember walking to school, and I had to cross the street. And it seemed to me this monumental undertaking. And then I went back in the early 90s when Clinton went over there, and then the two countries reconciled. And I did the walk, and it literally is like 3 minutes. But at 10, it was huge.
So I think we've had an earlier conversation that you are the youngest of 9 children.
I know there are only 9. My mom should have had more children.
So I'm the youngest of 7, and I think the audience should hear growing up in a mini village what that was like being the youngest.
There was never a quiet moment. So now I really like the quiet because I had quite enough noise growing up. And I really think I'm a writer because of my placement in the family. You know, if you're the oldest and you come here as refugees, the chances of you becoming a writer is almost zero because you go to college, like my brothers did, and they major in things like medicine and engineering because they had to help the younger ones go through school. By the time I came along, I was just responsible for me. So then I could take off a good 20 years and just be poor, which is what I did. And there was no one else to yell at me about it. So, so I think everyone has a story inside of them, at least one good one, and I just got to have mine out because I am the youngest.
And you've also talked about you're the youngest, 9 children, but you mostly grew up with your mom. Your dad was MIA?
He's still MIA. You know, I just read a story in the LA Times. They did a memorial in Little Saigon where they buried the bones of, I think, 18 soldiers from South Vietnam, and they finally got him a place to rest. And I would love for my father to be included in that. But the simple truth is we know absolutely nothing more about him than what happened in 1966.
So what happened?
He's just gone. He was on a bus. We know that the communists took him, and that was 1966, and then it remains in present tense. You never say someone was missing in action unless they found out something more. So he is missing in action. You know, it remains in present tense.
So 1966, you were 1.
I was 1.
And your mom, how old was the oldest child?
18.
Okay, so your mom had 9 children, 18 to 1. Like, how did she manage?
You know what? She doesn't even think of herself as that special. If you were alive during the war and you lived inside a war, you do not sit there and pat yourself on the back and go, wow, I'm so amazing. I'm raising 9 children in the middle of the war. You're simply existing. And all around her, there were other women raising 9, 8 children. That was just the norm. And I asked her, why did you have so many children? And she just looked at me like, well, that's just what everyone else did, because the government, this is in the mid-60s, there was no birth control. The government just didn't allow it, because why? They wanted soldiers. They were literally breeding children to make them into soldiers.
Yeah, so my mom also told me the story of no birth control. The unexpected 7th child. So tell me, you came to America on a Navy ship. Okay, so how did that happen? Where did you land?
You know, we were lucky. We got government Navy housing, and it just so happened that our back door leads to this alley, and this alley led to the shipyard, and the shipyard had ships standing there. So it was just pure luck. And then 2 days before Saigon fell, which would be April 28th, when you're my age, you know all about the April dates. April 28th, April 30th, you know them. It's like they're like your second birthday. You know, we heard whispers. Like my father, friends were still in the neighborhood. So they said, okay, on this day, at this time, very quietly, without making a big fuss, just pretending like you're going for a stroll by the river, and then get on this particular ship. And, you know, there was probably some kind of signal. And make sure you get on the right one. It wasn't like they announced it to the whole neighborhood that they were going to leave. It was a quiet undertaking, because they didn't want thousands of people storming the ship, but it happened anyway. There's no such thing as a secret among Vietnamese. Everyone found out. You know?
And so where did you land first, in Guam?
We did. I remember floating in the ocean. And remember, when you're 10, your mind is just hilarious. I thought we were on a strange vacation. We left before I finished 4th grade, and the whole time I was on the ship, I kept bugging my mother to go back because I had not finished 4th grade, and I needed to. And my mom was very evasive. She would never tell the children, you are never going back. Just imagine what that would be like. So she would say something like, oh, okay, a little later. First, you know, let's brush your teeth. Just very practical things. And then some ship came and hauled us all the way to Guam because our ship stopped working. I have no idea why. But I do remember a rescue. I remember them handing over boxes and boxes of oranges and bananas to us. I can't tell you if the ship was American. I have no idea. I do know that one person had red hair, and I had never seen a red-haired person before, and I was fascinated by this human. And so that made its way into Inside Out and Back Again.
Yeah, so speaking of Inside Out and Back Again, so this is a book that is told through the voice and the perception of a 10-year-old. And it's written in verse. So tell me, like, did you always want to write it in poetry?
I'm not a poet. I just pretend. Here's what happened. So you graduate from NYU, like I did, with an MFA, and you get very ambitious. You decide that you're going to write the novel, okay? And this novel will span, just 4,000 years of Vietnamese history. And it will have, just like 50 main characters. And you write this novel for, 15 years because you're stubborn and you think it's going to work. And after 15 years, it's now sitting quietly in an old laptop where it shall remain. After this effort, I was exhausted. So Inside Out and Back Again just came from this last-ditch effort to make this work. Otherwise, I was going to go raise chickens or something, right? It would be a new career altogether. So then I was standing on the playground one day. Now remember, I haven't been back to a playground since I was 12. My childhood probably stopped at 12. I had a child, and I took her to the playground. And while I was standing on the playground, all these images started coming back to me of what it was like to stand inside a playground in Alabama. And it didn't come back in long, rambling sentences. It came back in quick snatches of images. So right then I knew I had my voice, and it came out in verse because if I switch over to my Vietnamese brain, I think in images. I don't think in sentences. So you're reading it in verse because Ha, the main character, is thinking in Vietnamese. And I haven't returned to that voice because I haven't had another character think in Vietnamese so closely like that.
And the story is based in Alabama. Is that where you came when you first arrived?
Yes, I was. So we landed in this place called Alabama. I've never heard of it before. So we go to, we had a sponsor, like many people have sponsors, and he did not look like a cowboy, but I had to jazz him up a little bit for the novel because, you have to jazz up everybody for a novel. And I made him much more interesting than he was. He did come to Florida to sponsor one human. He just needed one person for his car dealership. And my brother was a mechanical engineer. So then he picked my brother, and then my mother looked at him. And without speaking one word of English, he took the rest of us, because that's what she does. Okay? She's already raised children in a war. This man has.
So he took all 9 kids.
Of course, because she looked at him. So, and so we went to Alabama. And I remember walking into 4th grade in Montgomery, Alabama, the first day, and I did not speak a word of English. So they stared at me, and I stared at them, and I just realized, oh, it's gonna be bad. And it was, until I got my voice back, until I learned enough English to yell back at them. And when you're 10, it happens relatively quickly. And within 3 months, I was yelling incorrect English back at people, but I was yelling, so.
So Inside Out and Back Again is sort of this internally feisty character.
Yeah.
She is frustrated that she doesn't know the language, she doesn't know the culture, she's super smart, but because she can't express herself, she feels stupid. So how much of her character was based off of you and your personality?
I don't think I was as funny or as feisty as how I was, but when you're writing a novel, what you get to do is jazz yourself up, okay? I remember being confused a lot. I think the reason I'm a writer is because I spent so much of my childhood just observing. Right? I was never the center of attention. I didn't like it. First of all, I was still learning English. And so I would just stand back and observe, and when you observe a lot, you just somehow turn into a writer. So that's quickly. But I do remember feeling dumb for the first time in my life. Because in Vietnam, I don't know why, I just walked around knowing I was smart. I was just a smart kid. I knew it. And then for the first time, even though I was still solving these algebraic equations, I couldn't write a simple English declarative sentence without making mistakes. And it bothered me to no end. I remember shredding up the American Heritage Dictionary for years, just trying to decipher this language, which I still haven't deciphered. It's still a baffling, weird, hissy language.
And also the book is really relevant today. So even though it takes place in a moment in history, there's parts about it where Ha encounters bullying at school because she's different. And that subject is so relevant today. Was that on purpose, or?
Oh gosh, if I could plan things like that, I would be so much more brilliant. You know what, you just write and then you put it in there, and suddenly, by luck, it hits whatever is going on in the culture. I know that Inside Out and Back Again is required reading for 8th graders in New York City, and part of the reason is because it looks at bullying, and it looks at refugeehood, and it looks at resettlement, all the themes that are going on today. I mean, we're still resettling refugees right this second. And right this second, somebody is floating out in the middle of the ocean looking for a home. So this is still going on right now. Did I know that when I was writing it? No, I thought I was writing historical fiction. So, you know, the refugee story just never went away, unfortunately.
So when you started writing this too, it wasn't always intended for middle school either.
Again, I don't plan. I wish I could. So I'm sitting around writing my adult novel that went absolutely nowhere. And I thought, I know, I am tired. I will write about myself, which requires absolutely no research, right? Because I'm like, it's me. And then I said, I know, I came here at 10, my character will be 10. See, this is what happens when you get really tired. A novel comes out of you. I suggest writing until the point of exhaustion, then suddenly you will have a hit because you're just so tired. And I'm like, I know, I'll put it in Alabama because guess what? We were in Alabama. I was done inventing at this point. And then it just worked. And I think it worked because I stopped being writerly. This is what happens when you go and get an MFA. You get very writerly. My previous novel, my sentences just went on, and it would loop around. You thought you were reading Spanish in English because it just went on and on and on. And it just didn't work. It didn't ring true. So once I stopped being a writer, I wrote.
Yeah, and I think the authenticity of the character really shows. What I also love is the title, Inside Out and Back Again.
Oh, I had nothing to do with that.
So how did you come up with the title?
Well, it's because my editor said no to my first title, which still hurts my feelings.
What was the first title?
Because once I name a book, that's it. Okay? In my head, it is still called Buddhists in Alabama. What do you think? See? Every school visit I go to, we take a vote. So we will do it now.
Yes.
All right. If you like Buddhists in Alabama better, raise your hand. See, I never get enough votes. It is just not fair. It is still my favorite name. So then I got Wise. The next two books, they're totally my title. Because here's what you do. Before you even pitch your next novel, you send a little email, and then the catchphrase at the top will be the title of your next book. That way it gets embedded into my editor's mind, and she can't dislodge it. See, this is what I do now. Just send random emails with that title, just for like a good 6 months. And she's like, what is this? I'm like, I don't know, but just send it. And then after a while, she's like, oh, I like it. This is how you do it.
That's good conditioning. So I want to talk a little bit about your second book. Mm-hmm. So the second book is called Listen Slowly.
This one.
And it's about a Vietnamese American from California, a girl. I think she's in her teenage years.
She's 12.
12, okay. And she is kind of forced to go back to Vietnam on a family trip. And she gets there and she hates it.
Oh, yeah.
She hates it. So it's such a contrast, and the character's name is Mai. It's such a contrast between Mai and Ha from your first book, because Mai isn't embracing her culture. She's not rooted in her culture. So how come you went from one to the extreme other?
Because, I come from a clan. When you are from a family of 9, they reproduce. And when they reproduce, there's just lots of humans to choose from. So one of the humans went to Vietnam and came back with these observations. And I was like, interesting. She said there were a lot of wild dogs running around, and then it was so hot, and then there were wires everywhere. And I'm like, well, what did you get out of it? And she's like, oh, it's just really hot. I'm like, okay. There's the novel right there. And so in the story, in the beginning, when you write a novel, you have to have the character change. So in the beginning, of course, she's going to be all upset that she has to go. She would rather spend her summer surfing and eating fish tacos and drinking mango smoothies. But they force her back. So she's going to need to relearn Vietnamese the way Ha had to come to Alabama and learn English. But of course, a novel being a novel, by the end of the novel, she won't be so obnoxious would be the word. Yeah, but I like her. At home they call her Mai, and at school they call her Mia. Okay? And then I just got an email the other day of this little girl. She's like 13, and she says, when I grow up, I'm going to name my child Mia Mai. I'm like, okay, mission accomplished. Okay.
And so was she based on any niece or relative?
It was a niece,
Okay.
And then of course they grow out of this stage, and now she goes to Vietnam all the time. It's just, at 12, it's an age where they just want to be like everyone else, and they will use their American name. And then if you'll notice, because most children growing up here, they'll have an American name and a Vietnamese name. And then by high school, the Vietnamese name will start to come out. And then by college, it's full-on Vietnamese name. So I'm just like always trying to switch back and forth. Which one are you? What part of your life are you at now? So.
Yeah, it always comes back, right? You want to reconnect. So one thing that I wanted to also ask you about was with this second book, did it take you as long to find that character and that voice as it did with the first?
No, because I was very smart. I signed this thing called a contract. When you sign a contract, you put your name on this thing, and it says you will produce a novel in a certain amount of time. I didn't know this when I signed a contract. So let me warn you, don't do it. Don't do it. So then my editor, she's very nice. Everyone in publishing is very nice. It's not like in journalism. I used to be in journalism, and they would just yell at you. Okay, that's what they do in journalism. She would send an email saying something like, "Oh, when do you think you might maybe have, a synopsis?" And then because I was still in my journalistic mind, I was like, I have to make my deadline, right? So I got this novel out and met deadline because I meet deadlines. That was my personality. I got it out in 2 years, which is phenomenal for me, right? 15 years and then 2 years. I'm like, I rock! I'm like, yes, I am now a novel. So, and this was contemporary first-person slangy California talk. So the voice was very easy to grasp and to get. It's my third one that I missed deadlines on.
So the third one just came out in September.
Yes.
Called Butterfly Yellow.
Mm-hmm.
And it is about a boat person.
It is about a boat person.
It's about a Vietnamese boat person. Very timely, because around that time was actually when I first met Thanhha and asked her to do an event with us. And she said, wow, my next book is about a boat person. This is perfect timing. So very serendipitous. So the character's name is Hang.
Hang. Mm-hmm.
And why don't you tell us about this story?
You know what? I love this novel. You know how you fall in love, and I know you're not supposed to choose among your children, but I am choosing. Okay, you are my favorite. Okay, so I don't care. The other two can be jealous. It doesn't matter. The reason I like Hung is because I've been thinking about her for a good 30 years. I used to be a journalist at the Orange County Register, where supposedly more overseas Vietnamese live than anywhere else in the world. So if you want good Vietnamese food, you just fly there. And you just go to any place and it will be fine. Okay? So I was a reporter out there, and there were 2 times in the year where Vietnamese for sure would end up in the Orange County Register. One would be during Tết, and the other one would be April 30th. Those were our calendar stories. So I would go out into the community and I would do my interviews. And then I just knew I wasn't getting the full story, because there would come a point where everyone would stop talking when I would ask questions like, what happened when you were on the boat? They were like, oh yeah, it was bad, but now we're doctors. And then they would switch right into the doctor story. Or our children are all, amazing. And I was like, that's not half as interesting as what happened on the boat. But they didn't want to talk about that. So I knew journalism wasn't the way to go. Like I knew it was going to be a private, dire story, and I couldn't put someone's face and name to that story and splash it on the front page. And so I thought, I'll go fiction. I just didn't know it would take me 30 years to come up with a character and put the story behind it, and then match her up with a Texas cowboy wannabe. He's in the story for a very special purpose, and then finally it's done.
So, but you missed some deadlines
along
the journey.
Well, Trump got elected. That knocked me off a year. I was just sitting there commenting, just things like that. I was like, why? And my editor was like, get over it. And I was still going, why? And so I missed many deadlines trying to get this right, but finally.
So I recently read the book, and I think it was like a little bit more than halfway through. It clicked for me, the title, Butterfly Yellow. So if you're Vietnamese out there, are you familiar with the song Kia Con Bướm Vàng?
Kia con bướm vàng, kia con bướm vàng. If you don't, make your parents sing it to you tonight, okay?
So it's a nursery rhyme, and I actually still sing it to my children every night, because it's the only Vietnamese song I truly memorize.
I have a feeling it's like that with a lot of people.
And they want these Vietnamese nurseries, and embarrassingly, it's the only one I can sing to them. But it clicked for me because in the story, she is separated from her younger brother, and he goes to the U.S. She's left back in Vietnam, and several years have gone by, and she's never forgotten about him. Her mission is to go to America and find her younger brother. And I don't mean to spoil it, but I cried in moments because she sings that nursery song to him.
She does.
Growing up.
Yeah, and it's a book that has just as much humor in it as it has tears, and it's okay. I mixed it on purpose because I felt like if I just only describe the tearful parts, I am not sure if you can walk away from this book and still function, because it's pretty dire. I mean, it's just, I think the sadder the story, the more I bring humor into it, but I do it in a way that doesn't take away anything from the actual sadness. So it's a balance. And so that's why I set it in the dusty fields of Texas, just to contrast it with lush Vietnam. So everything is contrast. And so here's this little refugee girl. She can hear English, but when she pronounces it the Vietnamese way, which is how I learned Vietnamese. So when she says, my brother is here, she'll say, my barata is here, right? And you're just going to have to listen very hard and understand. And I gave Leroy, her partner in crime in the novel, the ability to understand. So he's your interpreter. And I had so much fun writing in a Texas voice, because I lived in Texas for all my adolescence. I went to UT Austin, so I can slip back right into my Texas talk. I sat right next to cowboy wannabes all through high school. I know this world well. I've even been to a rodeo.
So have you always wanted to mix humor and trauma together in your stories?
You know what? It happened accidentally with Inside Out and Back Again, and I liked it so much that I'm like, that's it. That's my voice. And also growing up, I was one, and I was born into this family with a missing in action father, right? So if you tell it straight, it's sad. I grew up with a missing in action father. There's nowhere to go with that statement but sadness. But I really only remember laughing at home. Well, does that mean we were in denial? No, we acknowledged the fact, but my mom set the tone. She's like, okay, your father's missing in action. We don't know what will happen. Maybe he'll show up, maybe he won't. But here's what you can do. You're going to work on your future, right? A typical Vietnamese mom. You will work on your future. That means studying. We're like, okay. But we were in Vietnam, so then we all went, okay. So then we did. And all I remember doing was laughing. My brothers are hilarious. I don't even think they know they're hilarious. They just are. They mimic Bruce Lee for me. They mimic Clint Eastwood. I grew up with these two characters. Everything they did was funny. And so now when I think back to my life inside a war, which is supposed to be horrific, and it was in many aspects, and not having a father around was very sad, but I also remember we just laughed all the way through dinner. I mean, sometimes you couldn't even chew because you were just laughing so much. And we still do that. And I never got a joke in. I am not funny to my family because they're like, oh, you are so sad. They take over and I just listen.
So do you incorporate any of their personalities in the characters of your book?
Of course, I'm a writer. I steal. So.
I was just going to say that for me, the two books, it was almost like in Butterfly Yellow, Hung was the older version of Ha in Inside Out and Back Again. So Hung is, I think, 18 years old?
She's 18 in 1981, yes.
And they both have this same gritty personality where they're survivors, they're resourceful, they're hustlers, they know how to make things happen, how to navigate, how to fight back. And I almost thought, wow, is this sort of like the older version of Ha?
I think that's very insightful. I think you just like certain characteristics in human beings, and then they come out in the characters you create. Now, you hope to have those same characteristics for yourself. I'm not sure if I have them all the time, but I can certainly put them in my characters, and that's what I do. Hang definitely could be Ha if Ha got left behind in 75 and she grew up under communism and didn't leave until 81. Yeah, I could totally be Hang for that. And I create characters that I want to go out to lunch with. It would be fun to go out to lunch with Hang. She would tell you all kinds of stories. So.
If anybody has any questions, we're going to open it up to the audience. I still have a couple more, but just go ahead and raise your hand and we'll take a pause and let you ask your questions.
Can you repeat the question after?
Yes, so we don't have a third mic, so speak as loud as you can and I'll also repeat it so that everybody can hear. Okay? All right, so I want to, as we're waiting for questions, I want to talk about your 8 siblings. Apparently they're really funny. Dinner is entertaining. Are any of them writers?
No, I don't even think they're interested at all. I'm the
what do they do?
Oddball. I'll just name them for you, right?
Yes.
We'll just go down the list because that's how I do it in my head. The oldest is retired. She used to be a secretary. And then next we have a mechanical engineer. And then we have an accountant who was a lawyer in Vietnam, but you can't translate law professionally the way you can, like math. So he lost his law degree. So now he is an accountant. And he's about to retire. And then we have a doctor, so my mother can die happy. There is a doctor in the family. Okay? And apparently this was not forced upon him. He said he read a children's book when he was 2 or 3, and it was about a country doctor who went and solved all kinds of problems for people, so then he just knew. He's just one of these kids. And then next we have an engineer. He does something. I don't know. And then next we have another engineer. He also does something. I don't know. And then next we have a monk. And then my sister, right, 2 years older than me, has an MBA, and I ask her every year what she does, and then she tells me, and I still don't get it. And I think, but she works for big-time companies, so I know she's important. I just don't know what it is that she does. And that's okay, because I'm going to ask her again next year, and she will explain it again. And then there's me. So, it isn't, but I think if let's say we weren't a refugee family, right? I think several of my brothers would be something else. I think one would have loved to be a soccer coach. One is just a natural musician. I think he would be doing something. He goes around and sings now, but he has a gorgeous voice. It's just innate. Most of my brothers can just listen to a song and play it on the guitar. I don't even know what that is, but I'm like, okay. And so, you as refugees, your future is different than it would be otherwise. But then, we have a whole new generation growing up who grew up here, and none of them want to write. None of them want to, they went into engineering, and now they're like environmental engineering. And let's see, what else are they doing?
Can you explain the difference, like as refugees, you grow up wanting a different career?
Well,
so explain
let's say you are the oldest in a family of 9, and you decide you would love to paint for a living. And you look at your 8 siblings, and you look at your mother. The chances of you painting for a living is 0. Why? Because as soon as you graduate with that BA in art, guess where you're heading? To wait tables. So that is not a career that is going to help 8 children, because that's where I headed after I got my MFA. I went and waited tables. If I were the oldest in the family, that would have been ridiculous. I could not have done that.
So was your mom more accepting of you wanting to become a writer?
Oh, here's what happens. By you're the 9th child, as long as you're breathing, your mother is happy. She doesn't care. She's tired. Okay? She's already raised the other 8. So she's like, okay, you're walking around. Just kind of stay out of jail. I'm like, I got it. I'm out of jail. And you're good. I'm like, okay, see? Be the 9th child. It works out.
What about your siblings? Have they read your books?
They have, and
All
this
of
is their favorite. Yeah, I make them. They're your clan. They have to. No, it's part of the deal. I listen to their jokes. They read my novels. That's the way it works. So my family, they're hard to please. So when they read the first one, they didn't say anything. I'm like, okay. They read the second one. They didn't really say anything either. I'm like, okay. They read the third one, and then I started getting emails. This is the one. This is your best work. So now I've pleased my family, and I can stop writing and just eat ice cream all day long. So.
Why do you think that they related the most to the third one?
I think artistically, as far as being a writer, I put the most effort into it as far as sentence construction, and I worked very hard on the reveal. I worked on pacing. None of this is interesting to a regular reader. It's a writerly thing, and they've recognized it. And maybe they just feel like, I'm overdue some compliments. So they're like, okay, we'll just send some emails. Maybe she'll stop,
Because you had mentioned that you stole some of the characteristics and stories from your own siblings, how do they feel when they read the book and see themselves reflected in some of your characters?
I knew that they might have a reaction because they are very loud and they are very opinionated. So what I did was that I hid behind this thing called fiction. I did not write a memoir. A memoir meant I would be spending years answering questions, defensively. Okay? Behind fiction, you can just simply say, it's fiction. So I have 6 brothers in real life. They will recognize aspects of themselves in all 3 of the brother characters in Inside Out. And I did that on purpose. They cannot point to any one character and say, that is me, because it's not true. Okay? And I also did not name the characters after my brothers, because they could say, I'm very private and I don't want that. I said, I respect that. So I named the boys after their sons.
Did they catch on?
Yeah. The sons are happy, I think. So.
Yes, back there. And the question is, have your nieces and nephews read the book, and what do they think?
Oh, no, I tied them to a pole. And they had to read it before I would let them out. Of course they read it. We're related, you know? I mean, I had to, like, watch them graduate or whatever. So, yes, they are reading the book. And I will be going to their weddings and everything. It's part of the deal, all right? I think they're happy for me, you know, more than anything. They know how much I suffered. I didn't suffer quietly. I complained a lot during the 15 years. I was always sighing. They're like, why don't you just stop? I'm like, I can't. It was very melodramatic. So.
We have a question over here. Ooh, so the question is your main female characters. Where did the names come from?
Well, Ha is me. I was named Ha.
I didn't even get that.
I know. So when I was born, I only had a very simple name, Ha. If you're Vietnamese, you would know that it means river, and your tone drops. It is not Ha, it's Ha. Okay? So then I went to this place called Alabama. I walked into a school in Alabama. They did not hear Ha. They heard Ha. Then after a while, they started calling me Ha Ha. And then, it escalated to Ha Ha Ha. So then I went home and I decided, how can I punish these children? I decided I would take my middle name, which is Thang, and graft it together with my first name, Ha, and make this glorious new name called Thanhha. In my head, I was brilliant. Okay? I went back to school. They pointed at me. I said, Thanhha, right? So logical. You know what they heard? Thanhha. So yes, all the way through high school, all until I graduated, I was Thanhha. Okay? And now I've destroyed this name. Vietnamese is monosyllabic. I've done all sorts of things to the language. I grafted them. There are H's that shouldn't be beside each other. Okay? So when you look at this name, you get very confused. You have no idea what to do. I see this all the time. English speaker, Vietnamese speaker, everybody's offended, okay? Immediately, you look at your toes so that I won't make eye contact with you and make you say it, because you're like, it's just a stupid name. What did you do to the language? So yes, this is me. I have been in Vietnamese bookstores where they are so disgusted by me that they took a black marker and put a slash mark between the Thang and the Ha. And every Vietnamese who emails me, they don't like that. They do not do the Thanhha thing. They do the Thang and then space, uppercase H, A. That's how they do it. It's hilarious. I'm like, sorry. I was just trying to get back at the Alabamians. It didn't even work out. So.
Well, it's a lovely combination. So I do want to ask, there's a question over here. Oh, great question. So let's start with the first one. What advice would you give somebody else who's looking to also write a book and trying to find their own voice?
Okay. I would read a lot. Read what else is out there. Because the whole point to writing is to be distinctive. So if there's already a voice out there, you don't want to be 100% exactly like that voice. So you want to have it be inspiring, but not be that voice. So that's the first thing. So you must read. And then I truly believe the closer you get to telling a real character rather than something fancy that you think is going to win you an award or something fancy that everyone will think you're such a great writer, none of that works, okay? You're just going to have to invent a real character. And I think you're going to have to allow yourself years to suck. You're going to be a bad writer for a very long time. And it's okay. It's just part of the deal. It's just part of the deal, all right? No one has to read it. You can go into a very quiet workshop and suck there. Only like 12 people will know. So it doesn't even matter. You can even go as someone else. I wouldn't even go as my real name. I would go as my sister, right? Just take your sister's name, sign up for the class, and be that person. It will free you, okay? It will free you up. And you're gonna write for a long time, and nobody's gonna publish it, and it's okay. It's part of the game. And then suddenly, one day, you will suck a little less. It's part of it. It's just part of it. I mean, to expect yourself to sit down and suddenly just spin out these sentences of gold, it's ridiculous. It's so much pressure. And the thing is, this is solace. Every writer starts all over again. So I finished my 3 books. Guess what I'm doing for the 4th book? I have to start all over with a blank page, just like you. There's no guarantee, you know. Do you get a little faster? Yeah. But does that mean you know exactly what to do for your 4th book? No. Does that mean it's going to work and everyone will love it? No. That's just part of the game. Okay, so you do have to say, I chose this. I enjoy sitting alone and playing with my hair and talking to myself for years on end, so much so that I have better conversations with myself than other humans. That is what's happening. But that's just part of it. So you accept all kinds of things. And then I truly believe everyone has at least one good book inside of them. I know this, okay? But you're going to have to work at it. And it might not even happen until you're 80. And it is okay. You can publish at 80.
And what was the second question?
What is something that you wish someone had told you?
Oh, so what is something you wish someone had told you at the beginning of your journey in writing?
That it's just going to take a long time, and you know, I don't even have a competitive spirit, but I remember graduating and all these people I knew were getting published and I wasn't. And it does kick you in the butt, right? It's just that little kick. But then you're just going to have to say, it doesn't matter. Your book will happen when it happens, and then you'll be ready. And just be happy for the other person, because I really think the book will happen when it's supposed to, okay? You're not going to get published before. And there are people who get published too early, and then they have to write for the next 40 years, right? Feel sorry for them, okay? If you make it at 25, that's another 40 years of writing, folks, okay? That's an intense amount of time. I would make it around 45. Then you only have 20 years to stress, okay?
Yes.
How much of the character Ha from Inside Out and Back Again is based on you?
Oh, it's a great question. So how much of the character Ha from Inside Out and Back Again is based off of you?
Well, she has my name. She has my age. She has my mom. My mom is exactly like this. And she has my missing father. Everything else, I lied. I lie for a living. So now I have no idea who I am, because I have lied so much that, you know, I have no idea. I am Ha, but then I'm not, right? So I don't know. I just lie.
This is what's going through your head when you're alone. So you talked about your siblings, but I want to know a little bit more about your mom.
Mm-hmm.
What is she like?
She's just like the woman in Inside Out and Back Again. She has an iron will, but if you meet her, she would just be a very poised Buddhist lady, okay? She's never eaten a whole banana in her life. She eats half. She's that generation. She writes poetry, but she keeps it to herself. You know, that she recites poetry the way I, you know, sing songs, but again, that's for herself, okay? Everything's poised. I remember one time, this is the difference between myself and my mother. One time I was boiling broccoli, okay? And I ate all the broccoli straight out of the pan. That was horrifying enough for her. And then she had to watch me drink the broccoli broth straight out of the pan. She was aghast. She was like, who does that? And I'm like, who doesn't? So that is the difference between us. She's just very, very poised. I was raised in Alabama. There is nothing, you know, I'm like, Mom, you brought me to Alabama. What do you expect? And then you took me to Texas. How am I supposed to be poised after that?
So what would you say was the most important lesson you learned from your mother?
Nothing is ever that bad. Now, this is the same woman whose husband went missing in the middle of the war. She had 9 children, the oldest 18, the youngest 1, and yet anything I can come up with and whine about, she would say, it's not that bad. We'll figure it out. And she would figure it out in her calm way. We'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. And she does. She figures everything out. She doesn't panic. She's probably the only human I know who just doesn't panic. She just sits there very poised and figures it out. So then I pretend when I'm alone. I'm like, I will now sit very poised and figure things out. All I do is play with my hair. I'm like, I wonder if my mother played with her hair. So I call her up. I said, Mom, when you were being poised, did you play with your hair? She's like, who does that? See, this is the difference between us. So.
And how old is she now, in her 80s?
She is 88.
And still poised?
Very poised.
Amazing.
Yes.
Question over here.
You mentioned that you were in Orange County
Mm-hmm.
After living in Alabama and Texas. Did you move there on purpose to reconnect, or were you just like, that's where my job is?
So the question is, going from Alabama to Texas and then to California, what was your reason for moving?
I majored in journalism at UT Austin, and then this is in '88, and I was among the first wave of Vietnamese journalists, and they needed someone to cover Little Saigon, or help cover Little Saigon in Orange County, so they hired me straight out of college, and they gave me the police beat overnight or something. I mean, it was, weekends or something. It was just one of those cub reporter jobs. So I went out there for that, and I was just thrown into the Vietnamese community, and my Vietnamese was really bad. But of course I faked it, because who interviewed me? Non-Vietnamese speakers. Of course I said, oh yes, I speak Vietnamese. And so I would get out and do these interviews in my babbling Vietnamese, and I got better with time. Because, when you go, you're focusing on school, you forgot to practice your Vietnamese, and I would only speak it with my mother, and apparently my mom forgave a lot, because she would just guess from my facial features and my hands what I was actually saying. And then when you're a journalist, that doesn't work so well. You actually have to speak. So then I learned. But now I'm friends with a bunch of Vietnamese on Facebook just so I can read Vietnamese, and now it's making my English worse. So apparently my brain can only have one language at a time, so I don't know what's happening. I'm going to pick up, I don't know, some other language just to really mess with myself. So.
Yeah, there's a question back there, and then we'll get to you. It's a great question. So how do you balance being Vietnamese American, because that's the majority of your upbringing, but then also staying rooted in your Vietnamese side, even though you're not always surrounded by the community?
Right. I think I go back to my journalism days, right? I am an observer. So I don't bring myself to the center of the scene. I interact with whoever's in front of me. So if you are part of the Vietnamese community and you see me, and however you see me, I will react to that. Okay? So then if I'm out in Orange County, I will speak Vietnamese, I will eat pho, I will do everything that the Vietnamese do, and then still my sister will say, you're not really Vietnamese. I don't know what that means. So, and then when I'm here, I just wait for people to bring them to me. For example, I'm the only Vietnamese in my little village in Westchester. So I represent Vietnamese hood. I'm like, okay. So whatever, they throw all kinds of questions at me. Do Vietnamese do this and Vietnamese do that? And I answer them all, like I'm some expert. But that's because you brought it to the table. That's how you want to see me. So then I'm like, okay. I mean, they ask things like, what do the Vietnamese eat for breakfast? And I'm like, oh, what do the Vietnamese eat for breakfast? And I'm like, I know, corn. I just make up stuff, corn. And then I don't know. And then now this person's running around the world going, all Vietnamese eat corn, until they see a documentary, and then they'll know. So as far as identity, my identity, I would say I'm a chameleon. I can just blend, okay? And I find it more fascinating what people bring to me rather than what I project. So I just wait, okay? And I'm trained as a journalist. I can fit in just about anywhere. I can go anywhere and interview anyone. So it's, I don't find myself. Actually, I like it when I'm in a limbo, because then questions come up, and then you get to, it startles you, and then you're really alert.
That's great. I think there was a question over here.
How did your time as a journalist prepare you for narrative writing, and what did that transition look like?
So how did your time as a journalist prepare you for narrative writing, and what did that transition look like?
Okay. When I was a journalist, I only lasted a year and a half. So I was a cub journalist. I didn't get to write the big features. And all I wanted to do as a journalist was to sit there and craft sentences. You don't do that as a journalist. You're supposed to run out into the world and get the how, where, what, and why, right? So then it made me so hungry for just time to sit there and craft sentences. Now that I've done it for so long, I'm like, ooh, journalism does not look bad at all. See, your brain constantly wants what it doesn't have. At least mine does. So now I'm like, ooh. But then I keep telling people I lie for a living, so I don't know what newspaper is going to hire me.
Fake news. We have time for a couple more questions. Yes, back there. Yeah, so the question is, what was your childhood like growing up in Alabama as one of 9 refugees in your family in probably a town that wasn't very diverse?
Right. Think back to 1975, okay? Think back to a time where a word multiculturalism hasn't even been invented. Think back to a time where bullying was just something kids did, right? How did it make us feel? It made us exceedingly protective of each other. I remember us just hanging out with each other. And it made, you kind of like just pull yourself together when you're outside. I remember that. As soon as I walked out the door, it was just time to be on alert. It's like being in New York City, right? You're just riding the subway. You're extra alert. You're on. Somebody's going to grab something at any second. But then once you step back inside your house, then you could relax. I remember like just even your body language would change. You would come back inside your house and it would still smell the same because your mom was cooking the same food, or basically what she could come up with. The language is the same because my mom only speaks Vietnamese, so that's what we spoke. And then all your habits were the same. You know, my mom would still put me to sleep with the same poems and stories that she's told me all my life. So you do have 2 worlds. And because the inside world was so comforting and protective, you're able to deal with it when you're outside the house. Now, after 2 years, you start to thaw, you start to pick up English, you start to have friends. So the outside world did feel a little friendlier. But you know what? I don't know how we did it other than to say we simply reacted. It wasn't like we sat down and had time to analyze ourselves. We were in survival mode. And when you're in survival mode, you're just reacting. Okay, this is what I have to do, this is what I have to do, this is what I have to do. And then for us, it worked out. Right? And then, but it didn't work out that great because we didn't stay in Alabama. We figured out there were no jobs there. So then we moved to Texas.
Yes, in the blue. So the question is, when you reminisce about your time growing up in Alabama, are they happy thoughts or are they memories that you're better off forgetting?
You know what? It's both. Just like life, right? I had really good friends in Alabama, and then I also faced the worst bullies in Alabama. I'm not a person who just put blanket statements out there. Alabama was the worst, and Alabama was also very good to us in some ways. Same thing with Texas. I had some of the happiest times in high school in Texas. I was on the drill team, you know. I drove around, and I don't know what we did. I managed to spend 12 years there, and I don't remember. But I remember having a fun time. But then I also remember being really lonely and left out. Like, I was the only Asian in high school, and I was like, well, who am I going to go to homecoming with? And will anyone ask me? And if you're in Texas, you know how big a deal homecoming is, right? This is the land where the mum is twice the size of your face, and you're supposed to stick it on your chest with pins. It's a very strange place. I don't know if they still do that. And then with streamers coming down, it weighs like 80 pounds. So you're like, who is going to pin this on me? These are the thoughts going through your head when you're 15. But you just grow out of it. I think my mom just instilled in me the ability to wait. Every time I came home with a problem, where am I going to get a mom and who's going to be my prom date? She would just say, just wait. And I'm like, okay. I don't know why I listened to her just all the time. I'm like, okay, I'll wait. And it did. It all worked out when I went to college. I went to UT Austin, and the world just opened up. Okay.
Good. I think all the way in the back, I see a, yep. The question is, what do you think is the most important thing for the older generation of the Vietnamese community to be doing now, and also the younger generation? And you can split that up if you'd like.
I think to tell each other stories. Actually getting to know each other beyond the roles that you play as parents and as children. Because we do fall into those roles. Because it's so comforting, right? I'm a parent, listen to me, this is what I do. And I'm the child, this is what I do. But you just trust me, your parents have been through a lot. They are filled with stories that they don't want to tell. So you're going to have to be a sleuth about it and somehow get it out of them in their unguarded moments, and you're going to get brilliant stories. And then at the same time, tell them how you feel. You don't have to play that child that they want all the time. And I'll bet you anything, they will be delighted. Okay, not delighted, okay. They will be surprised, okay, maybe surprised as to who you are. But I think they would like to know who is sitting in front of them. And I think you're old enough to share these stories. And I would say, it's just a hunch. The more reluctant someone is to tell his or her past, that's the person you go after. That's where the stories are.
That's a juicy one. Any last question? Yeah, so as an author, what do you hope your readers will take away from your books?
What do I hope? That first you read it and you understand that these people are real and they could be walking around right in front of you. And it just so happens because you read my books, you are allowed a window into their minds. And they might remind you of someone you know. And again, this whole reason for writing is to open up dialogue. Talk to your people. They are so interesting. Trust me on this, okay? They're filled with stories, and you got to get them, before they start forgetting their stories, and they're not going to want to tell you, but you belong to them. So you can just say, I have a right to know. Just play that card, okay? And go from there. I just think maybe read the stories together. That works. I know Inside Out and Back Again, it's great to read out loud. So I will have a parent-child constantly emailing me saying we read it together. And as these sentences come alive because you're reading them out loud, just trust me, stories will come out with them, okay? Or at least questions. The child will ask a question and then the parent will answer. So maybe go through that route. But stories, that's what we're looking for. Just a way to connect. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I think we see two more hands, so I want to allow for the questions. There was one back there. Was that you, Lonnie? Yeah. Yeah, so let me try to paraphrase that. So in your career going from a journalist to a writer, and I won't mention how many decades it's been.
30, it's fine.
So in the 30 years, what have you seen, your experience, your observations on how Vietnamese American writers and writing has changed?
I would say there were so few of us then. There's a lot now. I just got done with an event where they're coming up. I mean, and you will start seeing tons of stories. And it's okay. They won't necessarily write about the war or even about being Vietnamese. And it's fine. They might write about a duck getting drunk. I have no idea. There's so many stories out there. Actually, that's a really good one. That's my next book. Okay. But what I'm saying is you now have the right to just be. And because the scene is open, and I will say that you will be very welcome if you choose to write, whether about Vietnamese or not. I think the field is completely out there. There's a lot of support. And what has changed is that it's just not as scary, because you're like, who's going to read it? Lots of people will read it. Okay? So just know that. And they don't even, not necessarily just the Vietnamese, people will read it. If it's good, they'll read it. That's just always been my belief. So you will find your readers, and you will find a welcoming community. So go ahead and start waiting tables and write.
Was there one last question? I thought I saw a hand earlier. No? Okay. Oh, yes. Yes, of course. Yes, I missed your second question. So the question is, for the younger generations, what would you recommend that they do to try to preserve and be more connected to their heritage? And what are some things that you have done with your own nieces and nephews?
I follow them around, and I speak Vietnamese to them. And then they answer me in English, and I ignore them, and I keep speaking Vietnamese. This is what I do with my daughter. That is not to say she's fluent in Vietnamese, but I have infiltrated her mind enough to know that if I were to drop her in the middle of Vietnam, she will survive, right? The whole thing is about survival. So then you're kind of sneaking in the language. So one, if they decide to pick that up in college, the foundation is there. And then two, we have this glorious holiday called Thanhha, and you get bright little red envelopes with money in it. Everybody wants like those. So there it is. Just bribe them with bright red envelopes to come home and celebrate Thanhha. So those are two easy things. And then the food. That's the first step to retaining any culture is food, right? So you're going to do it with food. And I would say I wouldn't force anything. Just present it as fun and they will come. It's that simple.
Yes. So before I ask my last question, I just want to say that we do have some of Thanhha's books here today, Butterfly Yellow and Inside Out and Back Again. We have a special price, so we'll be selling them at the event. Thanhha is staying with us
Yes.
to do some book signing. So after this, please stick around. We have more food getting set up. We have refreshments. We want you to mingle, take pictures, ask more questions that we didn't get to during this Q&A. And tag anyone on the Vietnamese Boat People team if you want to learn more about our organization. We are a 501c3, so we are taking donations tonight if you wanted to consider it. And we're also selling our tote bags. So if you wanted to, show off a little bit of what we do, please purchase one on the way out. So my last question for you, and I've been dying to ask this one. So 3 books. One just recently released, already getting rave reviews, made me cry. I don't cry a lot reading books. Movies I do, but not books, and this one made me cry. So what's next?
I'm going to draw. I've decided I've used up so many words that I'm taking drawing lessons. I don't know where it's going to go, but I just feel like drawing. So
There's not another book in the making?
Oh, there is. There's always another book in the making, but that can, I'm just going to doodle for a little while, all right? And then I have a favor to ask of the audience. First of all, I want to thank Tracy and her whole team for setting this up. It's amazing. It's so fun. I've been running around the country promoting this book, and I would say this is the most fun I've had in the last 6 months. So thank you for coming.